Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Euclid 6 webinar. I'm François Le Goff, coordinating the Euclid activities here at the European Chemicals Agency. Today, the webinar topic will be the October 2022 release of Euclid. As usual, we are starting on the day of the webinar, a Q&A session using Slido. It will be open during the day, and we'll keep your questions anonymous if you want, and we will answer your questions during the day. All Q&As will be published after the event on our webinar webpage. You see here how to join. You just go to the Slido website and enter the hash code EuclidOct 2022. The agenda for today, I will start with an overview of the release. Then my colleagues Eduardo and Robin will do a demo of the new key features included in this release. I will then come back and give you a highlight of the relevant features and changes for specific Euclid user groups, such as users using Euclid for reach or CLP purposes. And my colleague Eduardo will then conclude this webinar. Let's start with an introduction to the scope of the release. And before we go into the details of this release, I would like to show you the release plan for the next month in Euclid. So at the end of October, we had the service release that we just published. And the next release will be after that will be an optional release in January that will be limited to configuration changes, such as update to the validation assistant rules or to the report generator. The release after that will be at the end of April, and it will be a major release, including format changes. You can see after that in July, October, there will be additional releases providing new features and improvements. Now some words about the Euclid October 2022 release, and I will start with some limitations. Contrary to what we do with other releases, this time we made available at the end of October only the installer and the installation package for the server installation on the Euclid website. The reason for this is that we have made changes to the core of Euclid, which is the application server of Euclid, Payara, and we upgraded this key component of Euclid from version 4 to version 5. We had to take special care of testing the updating process. And at the time of the release, we did not finalize the testing, and we have identified improvements that we can still make to the updater. This will be made available shortly after the release, but unfortunately not at the same time as the installer package. We have been able, though, to deploy the new version of Euclid in the ECA cloud services. So the 20,000 instances that we have currently on these cloud services are being updated at the time of the release. You will, of course, find more information in our news alert on the Euclid 6 website. An important piece of information also for the October release has to do with the classic interface. You might have noticed that since November 2021, we give users requesting access to the classic interface some instructions on how to get access to the classic interface. And while doing that, we also collect some information on the reasons why they need this old interface of Euclid. And in the past month, we have seen that the main reason is the lack of training. And because we have introduced missing functionalities in the web interface, and we have also fixed critical bugs and improved the performance, we have reached a stage where the classic interface is not going to be supported anymore. So this has to do also with the latest technology upgrade of the application server to Payara 5. It would be really too costly after this change to maintain the classic interface, and we took the opportunity to get rid of the classic interface and to maintain only one interface for all Euclid users. You will see if you install the new version that the launch screen, the installer, and the updater user interfaces have been refreshed a bit to reflect this change. So if you want to upgrade to the latest version of Euclid, be prepared to use only the web interface. And if you are not ready to use the web interface, have a look at our training materials on the website or contact us at the help desk, and we will provide support for you to use the web interface as the sole interface now for Euclid. All the details about the fixes, the improvement are available in the release notes published on the Euclid website. You see the link on this slide. And they are updated each time a Euclid release is shared with a group of users. So you will see that the last official release of Euclid to all users was done in July 2022. So if you look at the release notes and look at all the changes made since this date, you will have the full scope of the October 2022 release. I have kept here a summary of some of the changes done. I will start with the way to navigate from a substance or mixture to an inherited template. You can now do that in context. So if you are editing a substance or a mixture and you have some information managed inside the inherited template, you can, in context, go through to this inherited template and manage the content there. We have also done a small improvement, but really useful, to the user interface, where we display in a clearer way the ranges information, particularly when there is no lower or upper qualifier, like below or above or greater than. We have also removed the placeholders when there is no data. Before we used to indicate none in case no data was available, but as this was confusing for users, we decided to remove these placeholders. So it's clearer when data is not provided for some of the fields. In this release, we have also updated the validation assistant rules and the report templates, but I will come back to that in a later part of this webinar when I'm talking about changes that are more relevant to specific user groups. The key changes and new features introduced in this release are now going to be presented and demoed to you by my colleagues, Eduardo and Robin. So I will hand over to them to go through these changes in more details.
Thank you, Francois. Hello, my name is Eduardo Vencesla and I am a member of the Euclid team. I will go now through some of the features already mentioned by Francois today, which I hope will help you to have a good understanding of some of the improvements that we have included in this version of Euclid. The first one is an improvement we have made to the navigation tree. Displaying complex structures of data, especially in products and mixtures, can be challenging sometimes. And this is why we have updated the table of contents in Euclid to view the datasets within a mixture dossier in a simpler and easier way. For this, we have developed these new double arrows, which here display the full table of content of the target active substance independently. This new representation helps to have a better understanding of what we are looking at. To return to the mixture main table of contents, we simply have to click back on the double arrows. If you are interested about this feature, I recommend you to visit our YouTube channel, where we have a video tutorial about this particular feature, with more examples as well. I will go through some of the latest improvements we have adapted Euclid with, related to the use of the keyword to navigate and for data entry in documents and entities lists. These are simple and very common features, like using the tab to move between various fields or elements in Euclid. You can see how text fields, pick lists, blocked fields, checkboxes are now being highlighted while I press the tab key in the keyboard and I keep the mouse still. To access a field in edit mode, you can press enter. And to exit editing, you can either click outside the text field or simply press the escape key in the keyboard. The enter key can be used as well to select or deselect checkboxes, to create blocks, and to open a pick list. Then you can use the arrows to navigate up and down, and again press enter to select the value. I will show you now another feature we can find in this document. For example, here, if you wish to clone or duplicate several cross-references, you can simply click on the clone icon here, or press Ctrl+C to do so. In a similar way, you can either use the delete icon or press Ctrl+D to remove the items you wish to delete in this table. The keyboard navigation also works in ranges and for references and attachments in edit mode, but not to navigate in the table of contents, for example. Another improvement we have made is the cross-reference selection. In Euclid, when users wanted to select one or more documents to opt out, they needed to go through an extensive list of endpoints, which was sometimes unclear. Now, to select the document for opt-out, users simply need to select the document from the sliding window, which displays a structure which is similar to the table of content that is selected, which makes this process easier. In Euclid, users have been able to compare the content of any pair of dossiers in the past. And I will show you now a new feature in Euclid which allows users to also compare similar documents within datasets and between dossiers. This feature is available in the three dots menu of a document, and clicking on it displays a sliding window where the user can select the type of entity in which Euclid will look for a similar document for the comparison. Users can compare similar documents within mixtures, templates, dossiers, and datasets. And today I'm going to show you now this example with a dataset. The behavior of this feature is the same for either entity, and the only difference is that to select the relevant ones, users can search for it entering one of the given data in the different lists, as you can see in the screen now. If a similar document is not available in the entity selected, a simple message will indicate so. However, if a similar document type exists in the entity selected, users will be able to select one of them to start the comparison. As I have currently opened the document number 1, I will compare it with number 2. Euclid creates a comparison report in HTML, which is automatically downloaded. Opening the report displays the results, and if the documents are identical, a simple message indicating so will appear. Otherwise, the report will list the list of fields which contain data in both source and data and target documents. The differences are highlighted in red for the source document and in green for the target document. I will pass the floor now to my colleague Robin Allen, who will continue explaining some of the new features in Euclid. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Robin Allen, and I work in the Euclid team at ECHA. This topic, User Settings for Default Security Groups, relates to instance-based security, which is an optional feature of Euclid 6 Server. If you manage or use a shared instance of Euclid, this topic may be of interest. Instance-based security allows access within Euclid 6 to be controlled per entity per user and groups of users. Users are organized into security groups. Access to an entity can be defined per security group using the share functionality. The access can be read, read-write, or read-write-delete. When a user creates an entity, the user becomes the owner of the entity. Ownership allows the user to share an entity to any security group. A user manager can control the sharing that is done automatically when a user creates an entity. In this version of Euclid, that power has been extended to the user. After all, users own the entities that they create. Note that on import of data, the sharing is set separately. The sharing menu is open for an entity from its record on the list page via the menu here. In this example, the sharing is being set so that on creation of a substance entity, it is automatically shared with read-only access for all the users in the security group internal reader. A user can now set this type of sharing to be the default. This is done from the user settings accessed from the top right of the Euclid interface here. Two options have been added at the foot of the page. The first, Security Groups, tells the users to which security groups they belong. The second, Default Group Access, allows the users to set the default sharing per type of entity and security group that is applied when an entity is created. Remember that the sharing can be changed afterwards, but this feature may make that unnecessary. This example shows the same sharing being set up as was done manually on the previous slide, with read-only access for all the users in the security group internal reader. Our next topic is on importing datasets as a dossier. Import is accessed from the dashboard, which is shown here. Note the settings Default Group Access, which is where the sharing that is done on import is controlled. Raw datasets of type substance, mixture, article and category are now imported in a two-step process via a dossier, which with the feature Extract to Dataset allows a user to see beforehand exactly what will happen to each individual entity and document, including any copies of the raw data that are already in the database. This behavior has been introduced because it provides the best protection against conflicts with data that are already in the Euclid database. It also gives a higher degree of control than importing directly as a dataset. The import of dossiers is not affected. In the October 22 release, import as a dataset is still available at the link here, which opens the advanced import of a single dataset. Datasets imported from here, either singly or in bulk, are converted into dossiers. In this example, I imported a raw dataset named table salt. From the icon here, we can see that the result is a dossier. The name of the dossier is the name of the dataset, with this label prepended to it. It is important to understand the concept of dossier subject. The subject of a dossier is a read-only copy of the raw dataset from which it was created, which in this case is a substance. It is the subject that is extracted. The raw dataset may or may not already be present in the Euclid database. If the subject is not present, it is created on extraction. Extract a dataset is started from the three-dot menu here. First, it compares by UUID the entities and documents in the dossier with any that are present as raw data. The result of the comparison is a preview menu, which shows all the entities and documents that are in either the raw dataset or the dossier. Entities are shown on the left, and the documents they contain on the right. Each entity or document has a tick box, which determines whether the extraction acts upon it. To help the user decide which data to extract, each entity and document is classified from the reference point of the data in the dossier and labelled accordingly on the right. The label indicates what will happen in the extraction. So say to yourself, will be, followed by the label. So it's will be added, will be changed, etc. Added means that the entity or document is in the dossier, but it is not in the raw dataset. A copy will be created in the raw dataset. Changed newer means that there is a newer copy in the dossier, which, if ticked, will be written over the raw data. Changed older means that there is an older copy in the dossier. Removed indicates that the entity or document is not in the dossier, and it will be removed from the raw data. Note that the default states of the tick boxes favour the extraction of newer data because it is a more common use case. Then again, if you need to revert a dataset back to where it contains only the data from the dossier, tick all the boxes. Thus, the exact handling of the data can be controlled in a transparent and predictable way. Where deleting or writing over data, remember to take backup copies first. More details about these features and many others are covered in the user manual in PDF format, which is accessible at the link here. You can use Ctrl F to search for a feature by name. We also provide video tutorials via the IUCLID YouTube channel, which is accessible from the link here. For example, there is a video that shows a detailed example of how import and extract a dataset can be used. Thank you for watching, and I will now hand over to François Le Goff.
Thank you, Eduardo and Robin, for the demo of these key features of the October 2022 release. I'm now coming back to show you some highlights of relevant features for specific Euclid user groups. If you go to the Euclid website under the Euclid product section, you will see that we describe there the use of Euclid by regulatory authorities. Euclid is used worldwide by many countries in order to manage information on chemicals. For example, in Australia, in US, or in Europe. And you can see in this matrix the type of use that is made of the application by different authorities managing different regulations. In the next slides, I will give you some key information about relevant changes that are important for specific users in this release that we have done in October 2022. I will start with some relevant information for REACH users under the European Union regulations. And I wanted to highlight three things for these users. The first one, you have seen in the demo earlier, the cross-references improvement. And this is something that will be really useful for you if you are preparing REACH registrations and you would like to, or you need to opt out for some information. You will notice that with the new version of Euclid, it's much easier to establish links between documents in order to indicate which part of your dataset are considered as opt-out for your registration. For REACH registrants, we have also updated some validation assistant rules, particularly business rules and quality rules. For example, in order to check the reason for updating when you are submitting a dossier update, or to check that you have not introduced duplicate use names under section 3.5, where you report your use information and the type of use for your substance. Finally, we have also fixed an issue with the chemical safety report, which had to do with the display of fish toxicity information coming from endpoint summaries. I will move now to another group of users preparing poison centers notifications under the EU classification, labeling and packaging regulation. There you will see that the way we have updated the navigation tree might be useful for you because it gives you a clearer representation of the data at the level of the mixture, but also at the level of your substance in mixtures or mixtures in mixtures. By navigating through this dataset in a clearer way, it will help you provide the information needed at the correct level. For poison centers notifications, we have also updated and added new business rules, and we have also fixed some bugs at this level. And you will find all the details you need in an update of the manual for the validation rules for poison centers notifications that you will find on the Poison Centers website. Moving on to another group of users, still managed by ECHA, it's the EU Biosimilar Products Regulation users. Here, for this type of users, we are still preparing for the transition from the SPC editor, so the editor that allows you to prepare summary of product characteristics, to Euclid. The go live for this is April 2023, but you will start seeing improvements in Euclid to support this change. So as of today, SPCs cannot be created directly in Euclid, but this will be the case at the beginning of next year. In preparation of this transition, we are now supporting the comparison of individual documents. You can select one document in your dossier dataset and compare it with another document. The refactoring of the navigation tree is also important for this type of user because you will be able to manage the information about your product, biosimilar product, and the active substance, for example, in a clearer way. With this release, we have introduced some rules checking the content of the summary of product characteristics, and we have also added rules to check technical equivalence submitted for under the BPR. The last point I wanted to mention for EU BPR users is the new way to enter parameters for phrases, and this is particularly useful for hazard and precautionary statements. I will highlight that with a couple of screenshots here, and this is a functionality that you can now access using Euclid and navigating to the working context EU BPR SPC. You will see there that under the section hazard and precautionary statements, when you enter hazard statements and precautionary statements, you will have the possibility to specify in separate fields some parameters that are useful for the phrase. And you can see that sometimes you can enter free text fields, but sometimes you will have a pick list to choose from to complete the statements in the correct way. This improvement will be extended to other working contexts in the future as well. Moving on to the EU plant protection products managed by EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority. There, I would like to mention a couple of improvements, such as the update of the microorganisms table of contents in the relevant dossiers. This was updated in order to reflect the new information requirements introduced in the regulation update. Updates have been done at the validation assistant rules level. New quality rules are introduced, and we have also improved and fixed some existing rules. The reports that are used for the EFSA relevant working context have been updated as well. And as for the Poison Centers notifications and the biosimilar product regulation users, here the navigation tree improvement is also beneficial because it helps differentiating better between mixture information, active substance information, or information stored in metabolites datasets. You will see here the link to the EFSA webpage that contains more information about the use of Euclid for plant protection products in Europe. There was also a change relevant for Australia under the industrial chemicals legislation. We have updated the report, the GHS classification labeling report, to include AKI specific content when generated from the relevant working context. So if you are a user in Australia and you work under the relevant working context, you will see that the GHS classification and labeling report now contain more information, more relevant information for your legislation. That was all for this new part about changes relevant to specific user groups, and I will now hand over to my colleague Eduardo to conclude this webinar. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Francois. I will now wrap up today's webinar. The latest version of our software, IUCLID, is available in our website, and as my colleague Francois mentioned earlier, the following releases in April will include format changes. The classic interface is no longer included anymore, and the interface that you use in your browser that we call the web interface is now the only one available, and it supports all key use cases. As my colleague mentioned earlier as well, we will still investigate an issue affecting the updater, and we will make it public as soon as possible. To know more about the details of this and previous releases, you can check our release notes in the IUCLID website. Social media is an important tool for us, and we have a YouTube channel where we regularly upload video tutorials, and we also have a IUCLID group in LinkedIn where we public news, and we also answer questions. To contact us, you can use the help desk web pages, which is through the contact link. Then you select technical support, and there you can select IUCLID 6 or IUCLID Cloud depending on the instance that you are using. The Q&A session of today's webinar is still running, so we invite you to continue sending us your questions through the Slido, which will be open until 5 today. You can keep your questions anonymous, and the questions and answer will be published on the webinar pages in the upcoming days. The recording will be available today already, so you can watch this over and over. Thank you very much for your participation in today's webinar, and we hope to see you soon.